Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final session of the DPUB Summit. I'm pleased to be here with you as we are going to explore again this fascinating world of book tracking. We will have the privilege now of hearing from Noah Gaynor, the CEO and President of BookNet Canada, who will be introducing us to an exceptional sales tracking tool called SalesData. SalesData is a powerful platform that collects weekly point of sales data from over 2,000 retail outlets across Canada, providing valuable insight into the Canadian trade print book market. Noah Gaynor, with his deep knowledge and experience in the publishing industry, will guide us through the features and functionalities of SalesData. And through his presentation, we will gain a better understanding of how this sales tracking tool can unlock new opportunities in the dynamic world of publishing. As we conclude this summit, I encourage you to actively participate, ask questions, engage in discussions. We have a Q&A box, which is available at the bottom of your screen for you to share your thought, interact with our speakers, ask questions, and Noah will reply at the end of his presentation. Please note that this session will be recorded, allowing you to revisit the content later or share it with others who could not join us on this Friday. Additionally, EDRLab members will have the privilege of accessing a written synthesis of the session, capturing the key insights and takeaways, as well as all the other sessions. Thank you all for being part of the summit. Thanks again to our sponsors, the Iridium Foundation, Glassbox, Audio Boost, and The Mark. And obviously, thank you very much to our speakers, Noah Gaynor here. And I wish you all an engaging and enlightening session. Noah, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Marie-Laurence. Thanks everyone for having me. I know I'm the last presenter between you and a summer weekend, so I will try and get you out of here as quick as possible and well informed. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see my slides. So I'm going to talk briefly about sales data, as Marie-Laurence mentioned. I'm going to talk about SalesData, our POS tracking service. But before that, I thought I'd start with a very brief background on what BookNet is and what we do, because it's important to the story of SalesData about why we're involved in this at all. So to start, we are a nonprofit. We were incorporated in 2002, so we're 20 years old, by the Canadian book industry supply chain. Our leadership represents Canadian-owned publishers, multinational publishers with publishing and distribution operations in Canada, chain and independent retailers, and library and school wholesalers. In recent years, we've added public libraries to our governance structure. And those not familiar with Canada's language environment, we BookNet represents the interests of the English language market in Canada. We have a sister organization that operates on behalf of the French language market. They're called BTLF, and they run some similar services to the ones I'm going to talk about that BookNet runs. We partner with BTLF on many projects, and some of their systems actually run on our software. So, and we collaborate on a lot of stuff. One of the big takeaways for BookNet, and remember, is that we actually work in the cultural sector. We're funded partially from the Canadian federal government through the Department of Canadian Heritage, but we're primarily a technology company or a supply chain organization. So we're in this interesting cross-section between technology and culture. And it kind of makes what we do unique, maybe, to Canada a little bit. So BookNet's mission and mandate are dedicated to collaboratively improving the supply chain for books in Canada. As I mentioned, we work in the cultural sector. We work on technology projects, data projects, and all education and research around those kind of core areas with a tie into the book supply chain here in Canada. So why BookNet? Well, it was seen in 2002 or around 2001 that the Canadian industry needed to invest in the supply chain and in technology. And so, as I mentioned, the Department of Canadian Heritage was instrumental in forming BookNet Canada. Our initial funding, we were 100% funded from the Canadian government. That's no longer the case, but at the start we were funded 100%. So the other big thing is that BookNet is neutral. It's one of our core principles. And what do I mean by that? Well, BookNet doesn't favor large nor small companies. We don't favor established nor emerging firms, Canadian-owned nor foreign-owned publishers, nor public over private enterprises. We are interested in all of those groups' positions and needs, but we focus on ways to level the playing field and provide products and services that work for more than one particular group or entity. BookNet was formed to see benefits extend to all players through a central coordination and the development of common services. We act as a central clearinghouse of information and an honest broker, aiding in maintaining the trust of industry has been paramount since day one. We prefer to act as like a technological Switzerland, staying neutral in all the supply chain discussions. So what do we do? Well, as one of the key things we do is we provide services back to the industry. We actively support the software and services that we build and develop in-house, and we keep them unique to Canadian needs. We offer professional development as well as graduate training in higher ed programs. We advocate for international standards within Canada as well as representing Canadian internationally. We conduct our own market, consumer, and industry research with our in-house research experts. And finally, we connect different industry participants and collaborate on like-minded initiatives across the Canadian supply chain landscape. As I mentioned, we've been in business for 20 years now. This timeline here kind of shows the last 20 years of BookNet and the launches of our different products and services. I'm not going to go into this in detail. It's just to show that we've continually maintained an idea of iteration, and we've had new problems we've had to solve with Canadian industry. And so we've launched new products and services to solve those problems. Focusing a little more close in the last 10 years, we've really focused on, again, collecting, disseminating information. And I'm going to touch on a couple of these things in more detail, obviously. What we call this, I'd like to explore the intentional, incremental, integrated approach to our product and service offerings. Everything we offer, or most things we offer, are linked together to provide a more holistic view for the Canadian industry. So I mentioned standards and certification and research and education. Those are the foundations that we have built our products and services on. So we run electronic ordering network for Canada, EDI. We run library and SalesData, which I'm going to touch on today. We also run BTLF, which is our bibliographic aggregation service for the Canadian industry, and Catalyst, which is our business-to-business e-catalog service, like MVP text. But the reason I'm here today is to talk about SalesData, our national English language book sales tracking service. Now on its third iteration. We launched in 2005. It was part of our original mandate to provide information back to the industry. So for launch, we gathered a significant number of retailers to provide their most sensitive business information, their point of sales data, with the promise that all subscribers would benefit from the intelligence they would gather themselves with access to this information, as well as research and analysis that would provide back to the industry. Independent retailers, chain retailers, grocery, online, Retailers of all stripes signed on to the promise of greater data transparency and availability. Publishers and retailers work together with BookNet. Small staff rallied the troops and data sharing agreements signed. I'm going to go into that in more detail. And I'd like to mention that SalesData is the English language book tracking service for Canada. BTLF runs a complementary service for the French language market called SPAR, and they have information on their website about that. So what is SalesData? Currently, it tracks weekly point of sale data from over 2,700 retail locations across Canada. We estimate that covers about 85% of the English trade market. We also collect daily sales and inventory from select retailers. It's much more than a sales tracking tool. Our subscribers use it to investigate market trends, identify sales opportunities, plan print runs and book orders, and more. Plus, it's engineered to be affordable and is scaled to a subscriber's track sales through the platform. I'll explain that in a minute. It's an equal market opportunity. Large firms and small firms can all afford to have access to sales data. So what do we collect from retailers? On a weekly basis, and in some cases daily, our retailers send us a file that contains the ISBN, the quantity sold of that ISBN, the quantity that they have on hand, the inventory, the quantity they have on order with the suppliers, and the price they actually sold the book at during the week. Not the list price, but the price they actually sold it at, so that we can determine discounts in the marketplace. We collect data from the retailers, and then we match it up with bibliographic data that we collect elsewhere. We do not get bibliographic data from the retailers because we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of retailers, thousands of retailers. And so we couldn't take bibliographic data from all of those retailers and determine which one would be the right one. So we use a different source for bibliographic data. We do all the matching by ISBN in the back end each way when we do the processing. Who has access to the information in the SalesData system? It's an open system. Everyone who has access, for the most part, sees the exact same data. So suppliers and publishers have access, and they pay for access. Retailers, library wholesalers, and libraries for our LibraryData project who send us data get access to the service for free. We do not give access to the data to retailers who do not send us data. It's a quid pro quo. Sales agents have access, literary agents have access, associations have unlimited access, our government funders have access, and we provide bestseller lists back to national media so that they can have bestseller lists for newspapers and online. You'll notice that authors are missing from this list. And I know Laurent asked me to explain this. We made a decision early on, not just we, but the industry made a decision early on that we wouldn't share directly with authors at this time. It's really for a couple of reasons. One, we represent about 85% of the trade book market, all told. But there can be certain titles that we might represent a lot less than that. Books that might sell, and especially retail, like a book on knitting, for instance, it might sell in knitting stores. While we'd love to have those sales reported to us, we don't have a lot of knitting bookstores. So we may not have a full picture of a particular title. And explaining that to an author can be difficult. So we count on the publishers and the literary agents to, in effect, explain and share the data with their authors. The other reason is BookNet is relatively small. And so to support thousands of authors, all having access to data and every question would be difficult for us to manage. So we focus on these core stakeholders. And the other reason is there was some reticence by the retailers to have authors have access to their data directly without having the context of the data explained to them. Retailers didn't want authors coming into the store saying, you know, stock my book, it's selling so much, or why don't you have my book on the shelf? Look at these sales numbers. There might be a good reason that retailers chose not to stock that title. So that was the decision we made early on. We may revisit it at a later point, but for now we don't share it directly with authors. I also wanted to spend a few minutes on talking about how we recruited our authors at the start. Because this was one of the really important pieces of the service. As I mentioned, we don't charge authors. We also don't pay we don't charge retailers. We also don't pay retailers for their data. Retailers give us their data for free. And in effect, we're holding that data in trust for them. So we have this concept of doing no harm, not to steal something from Google. But what we're trying to do is lift the market up for everyone. We're trying to sell more books for everyone, or make books more available for everyone. So the idea is by having this view of the marketplace, everyone gets smarter and they can make more informed decisions. So the retailers really bought into that from the very beginning, most of them anyway. And they give us their data for free to share with their suppliers, with the publishers, with the idea, and this is where the altruism comes in, a little bit of altruism. It makes the industry smarter. It makes the suppliers and publishers smarter about the needs of their retail accounts. So we don't pay them, but they give us their data for free. Now they get access to the collected data for free as well by giving us data. We do not give access, as I mentioned, to any retailer who doesn't contribute data. You have to be contributing data to get access from the retailers. The other thing I should mention is the system is completely open, sort of. And by that I mean everyone can see everyone's data, but on the retail side, it's anonymous for the most part. So in our aggregated nationwide data set, everyone's data goes into that every week, but you actually can't tell which retailer is which. There's 2,700 retail locations in there. It would be really hard for anyone to pick out which specific retailer is selling which book when they're looking at the nationwide aggregate. And that's another underlying tenet of the service that we had to put in place to make the retailers happy, is that we do our best to guarantee anonymity of any retailer. And this is because we don't want one retailer knowing what their competitor is doing if they choose not to do that. So the data is anonymous at the retail level. It is not anonymous at the publisher level. And by that I mean every publisher can see every other publisher's sales. So Hachette can see Simon & Schuster sales in the aggregate. Penguin Random House can see House of Nancy sales in the aggregate. And that's another tenet of the service. that the retailers really wanted. They wanted competition amongst the suppliers and publishers to better serve their accountants, to make the supply chain better. And that competition to be able to see one another's titles as a publisher drives the publishers and the suppliers to do better. It also makes the publishers and suppliers just smarter on their business if they can see what's happening across large swaths of the marketplace. Now, I said the data is anonymous in the area, but another thing we do too is that we allow what we call peer data sharing. This is something that's controlled by the retailers, facilitated by us. And what this means is that a retailer can give a particular view of their data outside of the nationwide area to another retailer, or more likely to a supplier. So what this says is that a particular retailer, Walmart, for instance, could tell us to enable a peer data sharing agreement with Payment Random House, as an example. And this would give Payment Random House a view of the sale of just their titles at Walmart. This was another big recruitment tool because a lot of retailers would share this information with suppliers already, either by phone or fax or email, and it would take a lot of time and it was disruptive. Now we can do all of that automatically, not needing anything more than just the data feed from the retailer. So that's another big value add for the retailers. We also had commitment from some of our largest retailers right from the very beginning. As long as we can guarantee their anonymity, they were on board right from the start. So then we had to recruit enough retailers around them to maintain that anonymity. That took a little bit of time, about a year. While we were building the service, we were recruiting the retailers at the same time. And then when we had enough retailers, we launched. We're always adding new retailers to the mix. Last year, we added about 50 new retailers. So it continues to grow all the time. The last thing I want to mention that was really important to the service from the retail side is that the submission for the retailers has to be easy. It has to be automated wherever it can be. We're talking about thousands of retailers, and retailers are busy, especially independent, they're all busy. But independent retailers merely have the owner and one other staff member. And they don't have time to be running reports to feed us data. It just doesn't happen if they have to do it manually. So wherever possible, we've automated the data feed for retailers, or we've made it really easy for them to submit data. So that means working with the POS providers. This is the point of sale providers that the retailers use. So at the start of the service, we worked with any automated data feeds set up with the POS providers, so that when we recruited a retailer, we would say, well, let's say you're using BookNet, for instance, there's actually no work for you to actually set up here. All you have to do is turn on the feed. We talk to the POS provider, we turn on the data feed, and that's all they have to do. It comes to us automatically every week, the FTP primarily, and they don't have to do anything. And while I said we don't pay retailers, we do pay POS providers, both to build the reports and then maintain them. And it's not an insignificant cost. It's not massive in the grand scheme of things, but we have to price it into our subscription cost. So it's part of the business model that we have. And the more retailers we recruit that use the POS providers, the more the cost goes up. And I'll tell you a little bit about the business model in a few minutes. But so right now we have automated sales data feeds from these POS providers. We have many other POS providers that have built their own, other retailers that have built their own data feeds to us. We accept feeds via EDIX12, the APIs, anything. We'll pretty much work with any retailer to automate the data feeds. We also accept data feeds from publishers directly if they're selling direct to consumer. So if a publisher has a website where they're selling, those publishers can submit their sales to us as well. And we have a direct sales reporting portal. So for the few retailers who don't have POS or hand data reports set up for their POS, they can actually go into a form on the website, type in an ISBN and the quantity sold, and we'll verify that in the back end, and that can go into our data as well. So that's kind of the basic plumbing of the operation. So now that we have all this data, what do we do with it? Well, we load it into a platform. And that platform we call SalesData. As I mentioned, that platform is pretty much open to everyone for the same data view. It's a full business intelligence platform that we built ourselves. It's custom software, and we maintain ourselves. As I mentioned, it's on its third-ish iteration, so we've gotten smarter about doing this over the years as well. I'm primarily going to talk about sales data, but I thought people might be interested in our library data aggregation too. So I'll take a moment at the end and talk about that as well. It's a common platform for both products. So as I mentioned, everyone uses the same platform. It's a custom built platform. It's a business intelligence tool that we built based on the needs of the industry here in Canada. We have an advisory group of users who define what we do and how we share the data. So everyone has a dashboard when they log in. The dashboard just shows some top level stuff like how the market's performing this week, how it's performing compared to last year, what the top level subjects are, some research we may have published recently, stuff like that. What most people get into is the reports. So on the side here are our basic reports that everyone can run. I'm not going to go into all of this in too much detail. It would take forever. But I'll go over just briefly what they are. So far this year, people have been running about 1,000 reports a day. So it's a lot of usage. And in a year, we'll have about 250 to 300,000 reports run on the system in a given year. So probably the most used report is our bestseller list. And a bestseller list is exactly what it says. You run a report to impact the best-selling books over a particular time period. So I'll touch a little bit on a few things on this screen. So this is how you build your bestseller report. I'll skip the issue for a second. The top one that probably needs some discussion is market. So market in this context, all market, as I mentioned, is our nationwide area of retailers. It's the anonymous area that contains all retailers of all types. Online, library wholesaler, independent, chain, grocery, everyone's in that. Under this market option, users have the option to look at, may have the option to look at other specific groupings or channels of retailers. So we have a channel of independent retailers that everyone in the independent retail channel and all publishers can look at. So users who have access to that market can choose how to hear it. And they hit a subset of the market that's just as an independent. We have the capability to break the market into any channel we decide. But right now, we're not doing that for all our users, even 15 years in. And that's because of the anonymity restrictions we have. It's hard in some of these subsets or channels to guarantee the anonymity of the retailers research to break it down into smaller chunks. So an example of that would be, we'd love to break the sales down by provinces in Canada. And technically we can do that. And in the back end, we do that from BookNet. But we don't share that with our users at this point. Because we can't guarantee the anonymity of all of our retailers in specific provinces. So that's something we're continuing to work on. The reporting period, as I said, this interface is based on weekly data, but in different reporting timeframes, all the way back to the start of the service in 2005. They limit the rows anywhere to 50,000 titles. And that's just the limit of the system. So really you can dig into this data in lots of different ways. The other important stuff is the bibliographic data. So you can segment your data or filter your data based on lots of different bibliographic criteria. I'm not showing them all here, but then dig in by publisher or by subject, by format, by pub date, whether it's a Canadian title, and that means authored by a Canadian author, whether it's illustrations, any kind of basic bibliographic information. When you do all of that, you can run any bestseller report. The bestseller report is a list of all of the titles that meet your criteria for that week. We show you the bibliographic data, and we show you the actual sales number for that ISBN over that period. So the column on the furthest of my right, which is units sold, I've blanked it out here just for this presentation, but all users would see the actual units sold of that title. It's not a modeled number, it's the actual units sold from all the retailers reporting for that time period. And everyone sees that. There's a lot more columns than this, go off to the side. They show things like the inventory, how much is on hand, how much is on order, what the previous week sold were, how many stores are reporting sales, the subject, the pub date, all that information. It's all filterable, sortable, and you notice they can download the data or they can automate the report. Once you've built the report, you can automate it, save it, and set up a schedule. And every week we process new data, it will automatically email you the reports as a PDF for itself. So some people set up the reports and they don't even visit the system anymore. There are other report types. I'm not going into each of them, but we do have some that are what I would consider to be more business intelligence reports. So the app analysis report, which is one of the report types, allows a retailer or a publisher to compare their stores, inventory, and sales against other markets that they have access to. So why they would want to do this is It produces reports for them of titles that might be selling in the other market that they don't have in their store. So it's an alert mechanism. So maybe they missed the title when they were doing their initial buy. Well, this report will help surface titles they're selling well in the market they didn't buy. This can all be automated and set up. So there's lots of report types in sales data. We have a limited amount of time, so I think we went through all of them. And we have videos, all of them on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and search for President of Canada sales data, there are videos of all the report types there, so you can watch the videos and see how they work. I just want to take a few minutes and talk about LibraryData now before I get into the business model stuff. So there was a demand from our industry, from publishers and libraries, that they would like to track library usage. So in 2020, we launched a LibraryData service. And this works very similarly to the SalesData service. Every week, libraries send us the activity of their ISBNs at their library. So we aggregate that data together, like we do sales data. And it covers right now, about 25% of the English-speaking population. There are about 90 public libraries from 800 branches sending us their information in a very similar fashion to sales data. So from the public libraries, we get every week the ISBN, the number of loans they had on that ISBN in the week, the number of holds they have, the number of renewals they've had, and the whole collection of titles that they have. And we match that up to bibliographic data, and we make it available back to the market. Publishers have access to that data, public libraries have access to that data, and some retailers have access to that data. It's not digital data at this point, it's just print book library data at this point. It works very similar. So now when a publisher logs in, they can toggle between the sales activity of their titles and the library activity of their titles. They had a whole view of what's happening with that title across the whole market. It's really a unique product. And like sales data, we've heard about the library system allows us to have them send the data automatically every week. Similar reports to our sales data reports. And then if you want more information, all of these reports, there's videos about these reports on YouTube. YouTube LibraryData. So that was really fast in LibraryData most of the time. I was asked to explain a little bit how we make this all work from a business model perspective. So as I mentioned, we don't pay retailers and retailers get access for free. We do charge publishers, sales agents, and suppliers for access to the service. It's a subscription fee they pay. That subscription fee they pay is based on the tracked sales through the system. So what that means is that if a small publisher wants to access to the service, they pay a smaller amount because we're tracking less of their sales, or they just have less sales. Whereas a large publisher pays a larger amount because they're tracking more sales and they provide more value. So that's the way the model works. We take those tracked sales, we multiply it by billing factor, and then we issue quarterly invoices to our subscribers. Just about every publisher supplier in Canada subscribes, would be hard to do their businesses without it now. And our pricing is set by our board of directors. So we maintain, we're not for profits, we maintain a price that allows us to run and improve the service, but we don't generate profit from it. Our major expenses or costs from the services on the other side are, well, building and running the service is all done in-house. So our biggest cost is staff. Our staffing costs are fairly high in this project. It takes us about 3 or 4 full-time employees to run the service all the time, both services all the time. Our other costs are paying the POS providers. As I mentioned, that's not a major cost, but it is a significant cost. We have hosting and technology costs. Those are not insignificant. And then we also, while we use some of our bibliographic data that we aggregate ourselves, we actually license some bibliographic data from another party. We have to pay a licensing fee for that data as well. And the reason we did that is that it may be unique, a little unique to Canada, but so many of our English language posts in Canada are from the US and the UK that we don't have bibliographic reference for some of those titles. It's about 40%. So we have to actually have the bibliographic data for those titles from someone who aggregates in those other markets. So we have to pay for that. Again, that's not an insignificant price. So we have to put that into the business model as well. It is. And then we have still some government funding that helps with this, mostly from the education and research part of it. We do not charge publishers for the number of seats or licenses or any of that. You can have as many logins or seats as you want. And we'll train all of our employees all the time on how to use it. That's part of our mandate, and it's an expensive piece of the project. That's kind of an overview. I'm happy to answer questions about that. Just about done. The last thing I wanted to talk about was where do we see this going now? We've been running this for 17 years. Well, as I mentioned, we're always adding new retailers. There's always new retailers to recruit. There's always new libraries to recruit. So we're spending lots of time doing that. We've really decided over the last couple of years to start recruiting retailers that are not traditional bookstores. In the Canadian market, which has to do with the same in other markets, books are selling in a lot more retailers than they ever have in the past. And by that I mean there are craft stores and restaurants and hobby stores and liquor stores that are all selling books now. And we would like to capture all of those sales too. So we're doing whatever we can to enable reporting from the non-traditional bookstore accounts. And that's a whole different issue and problem to stand in front of. So we're spending a lot of time doing that. We do not have digital sales reporting, either in SalesData or LibraryData at this time. We would love to. We are fully capable of doing that. It's just that the digital retailers, because of the landscape in North America, is really dominated by just a couple of retailers. And one of those retailers just won't share the data at all. And it's hard for us to build an anonymous reporting aggregate with only 2 or 3 retailers. So this is a challenge. We are looking really closely at enabling digital item reporting from the library side, we're looking at that data a little bit more. We're always looking at building new reports and new insights. We just had a big release for SalesData a couple months ago, and we imagine we'll have another one this year, all driven from our stakeholders and our advisory from what they need. The other thing is, I mentioned some of the other products that BookNet runs. They're business to business, eHeadlog, Catalyst, have a link into SalesData so that when publishers are using Catalyst to sell books to their retail accounts, the retail accounts can access comparable sales data for titles real time in the catalog while in the hands of books. So we're spending on that all the time and providing more link between BookNet products to improve the supply chain. So that's something we're always looking at doing. And there'll be lots more that I haven't thought of. The market changes faster than I didn't even keep up with. Just about done. The other thing I just want to mention is a lot of the data that we capture in SalesData and LibraryData we use internally to research and put it together. Some of that research we back to SalesData subscribers only, but a lot is available for free off our website. Some of our recent studies we just released in the last few months right here. You have those on our website. We also release a lot of information on our market and our products to our tech forum website, which is our education website. There's videos and webinars there. It's all free. You can go to techforum.btforum.ca and search for SalesData and watch a bunch more videos, webinars based on the data we capture in SalesData. All right, and that's it. I'm at the end.
Thank you very much, Noah. It was a very insightful presentation and really so many details that I even don't have a lot of questions to ask. So maybe somebody in the assistance has a questions. I know that we are at the end of the session, so we can take one question, something like that. So I've got one. What is the difficulty for you to get the digital data?
Well, so from the, I mentioned from the retailers, from the large retailers.
Yes.
It's really just the landscape in North America for that data, for English speaking anyway. It's so dominated by one retailer. I won't name that retailer, but okay. It really, they have such a huge market share. And from my understanding in North America anyway, is they don't share their digital sales data with anyone. So, any aggregator. So we just can't get that data, and it's probably 70% of the digital market in Canada, or North America anyway. So that makes it really hard. Now, we have discussed and done a pilot of getting the digital sales data from the publishers, not from the retailers. So in running the retailers in for the publishers. We haven't done that yet. It's a whole other level of complexity because when we get sales data from a retailer, we get it for all the publishers, right? We don't have to, we get it for the whole market. We get it from a publisher rotating their sales. So we have to have a whole bunch of publishers. And asking publishers to send data is really difficult. So that's really the main reason. On the LibraryData side, we just haven't gotten to it yet. But we see the libraries are much more willing to share that reader data digitally. And it's not as proprietary. So we've already talked to the libraries about doing that. we're actually hoping to pilot that this year, so I imagine that will move forward.
Great. So if there is no other question in the Q&A, if there is none, so I will thank you very much, Noah,
No problem.
for this presentation. Many very useful information for the French project. And I will thank all the participants to the Digital Publishing Summit, those who are in this session and those who were in other sessions. And next year we will be live in Paris. There will be a face-to-face Digital Publishing Summit, and I really hope that you will join us in Paris. Have a good time. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.